Okay, so we have learned something called the arithmetic sequence. This is whenever you have a pattern of numbers and you're adding and subtracting by the same value, which is called a common difference. So what we're learning today is called geometric sequence. Geometric sequence is there is still a pattern, and we have to figure out what that pattern is. But it's going to be where I figure out what they are multiplying by each time, not adding or subtracting. So we have something called the R, which is our ratio, okay? In order to find out what the R is, we have to figure out what the pattern is, what I'm multiplying by each time. And the quickest and easiest way to figure out what I'm multiplying by is to divide the second term by the first term, okay, to figure it out. So if I can't figure it out, so let's look at number 1. So 1 through 6, we're going to see if there is a pattern and if it is the common ratio every time. So if I look at number 1, try to get adding and subtracting out of your head. We're thinking about multiplying. So am I multiplying by the same thing every time? So to get from 2 to 10, I'm multiplying by 5. Well, let's see if this is true, the rest of the pattern, before we just say yes. 10 times 5 is 50. And then is it true that 50 times 5 is 250? So it is. So this would be yes. And my ratio would be 5. If I look at number 2, okay, we have to figure out what my pattern is. Now, my first instinct is dividing. And yes, that's true, but we have to actually figure out what it's multiplying by. So how I figure this out is I'm going to put the second term over the first term. Okay, so if I type this in, and the easiest way is just type it in as a fraction, okay, 45 over 135. It comes out to 1/3. So let's see if I'm multiplying by 1/3 every time. So I'm going to do 135 times 1/3, and that's 45. Then I'm going to take 45 and multiply it, times 1/3, and that gets me 15. And then I'm going to multiply 15 times 1/3, which is 5. So this is a geometric sequence, and that's because I'm multiplying by 1/3 every time, okay? So number 3, am I multiplying by the same thing? So 6 times 3 is 18, but let's see if I'm multiplying by 3 every time. 18 by 3 is not 24, so this would not be a geometric sequence. It could be arithmetic, but we're not covering that for this lesson. Number 4, am I multiplying by the same thing? Well, to get from 7 to negative 14, I would multiply by negative 2. So let's see if I multiply by negative 2 each time. Negative 14 times negative 2 is 28, and then 28 times negative 2 is negative 56. So yes, this is a geometric sequence, and my common ratio would be negative 2. Okay, number 5. It looks like I'm going to be dividing, so I have to figure out what I'm actually going to be multiplying by. So I'm going to put the second number over the first. So this would be negative 40 over 80, which is negative 1/2. But let's see if I'm multiplying by negative 1/2 every time. So let's see. If I do 80 times negative 1/2, I get negative 40. And then if I do negative 40 times negative 1/2, I get 20. So far so good. If I do 20 times negative 1/2, then it's negative 10. So yes, this is geometric. Sorry for that. And my common ratio is negative 1/2. Okay. Next one, let's see what I'm multiplying by. To get from negative 9 to negative 36, I would multiply by positive 4. So let's see, I'm multiplying by 4 every time. Negative 36 times 4 is negative 144, so that's true. Negative 144 times 4 is negative 576. So yes, this is geometric, and my common ratio is positive 4. Okay. So we're going to take this and find the common ratio, figure out what I'm multiplying by each time to continue to find my next three terms. So here I am multiplying by -3 to get from 7 to -21, and the -21 times -3 is 63. So I'm just going to continue the pattern. 63 times -3 is -189. -189 times -3 is 567, and 567 times -3 is -1701. The next one, I need to figure out what I'm multiplying by, so the easiest thing to do is take the second term over the first term and just see what I'm multiplying by. So 768 over 3072 simplifies to 1/4. So my common ratio would be 1/4. So let's see the pattern. If I multiply 192 times 1/4, it goes to 48. If I go 48 times 1/4, it gets 12. And then 12 times 1/4, is 3. Okay. Now, that's all well and good when I'm just trying to find the 4th term, the 7th term, maybe even the 10th term. But when it starts getting a little tricky is what if they want me to find the 100th term or the 1,000,000th term? So I definitely don't want to be multiplying over and over again to figure out what that term is. So we are going to use what we call the old formula. Okay, so our old formula is a sub 1, which is our first term, times my common ratio raised to the power of n minus 1. Okay, now for the purpose of this, I want to go ahead and change the 7th term. Let's change it to the 20th term. Okay, and it may not come out pretty every time, but at least it'll make it to where it makes sense. So because 7th term means I could literally just do it 4 more times and get my answer. That doesn't make sense to me, so we're going to find the 20th term. All right, so number 11. My first term is 3. My common ratio, I'm multiplying by 3 every time. So that one just happens to be a coincidence. So I'm going to take my old formula. So it's a sub n equals my first term, which is 3. Oops, sorry, you can't see that. Times my common ratio, which is 3, raised to n minus 1. There it is. But what I'm going to do is take this formula to help me find the 20th term. So I'm going to substitute n with 20. So it's 3 times 3 raised to 20 minus 1. And 20 minus 1 is just 19. So it's 3 times 3 to the 19th power. And all I do is type that in my calculator, and I hit enter. And OMG, so maybe I should have left it 7th term. So you're not wrong, it is the answer. It's just because of the 20th term, that's a big old number. So I'm gonna change it to back to 7. All right, so let's just pretend that never happened. And I'm gonna change the n back to 7. So this is 7 minus 1, which is 6. And maybe it'll be a lot prettier. So my apologies. But there will be times where you do get an actual big number like that. So my 7th term is 2,187. Okay, so let's pretend that didn't happen in number 12. My first term is -4. My common ratio is multiplying by -5. Not just 5, but -5. Because -4 times -5 is 20. 20 times -5 is -100. So watch your signs. So now I take my formula, the first term times my common ratio raised to n minus 1. Okay. So I have -4 times -5. And n we're going to replace with 7. And 7 minus 1 is 6. Now, here's where I need to be careful. Because, and I know it doesn't show it in my formula, but I do not want to put -5 raised to 6 like this. Okay, because I want to show you the difference. I actually have to put -5 in parentheses raised to the 6th. Because if I don't, I'm telling the calculator to multiply 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 and then tack on the negative. I need to put negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. And see, I do get a different sign, so it does matter. So my 7th term would be negative 62,500. Let's just continue this, continuing with the 7th term. Number 13, I know I'm dividing, but I need to figure out what I'm multiplying by. So my first term is 400. To find my ratio, I'm going to take the second number over the first number. 200 over 400 is 1/2. So I'm actually multiplying by 1/2, which, yes, is the same thing as dividing by 2, but we have to show it as a ratio, so 1/2. All right, so now I have my first term, which is 400, times my common ratio raised to n minus 1. And since we want to find the 7th term, I'm going to do 400 times 1/2. 7 minus 1 is to the 6th power. So then I just do it in my calculator. Raised to the 6th power. So my answer is a fraction. Now, yes, we can leave it a fraction, but if they do want it as a decimal, then I would do 25 divided by 4 is 6.25. Okay, so let's continue. So yeah, so if you get a fraction as an answer, you could see it written as a fraction or change it to a decimal. Number 14, our first term is 1, and my common ratio is multiplying by 5 every time. So I take a sub n equals my first term times my ratio raised to n minus 1. And again, we're just going to substitute n with 7, so 7 minus 1 is 6. All I do is type that in my calculator. Oops. And I get, wowza, it ends up being a big number too. 15,625. Thank goodness for calculators. All right, here my first term is negative 1. My common ratio is multiplying by 4, not negative 4, because negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. So just watch your signs. A sub n equals my first term times my common ratio, which is 4, raised to n minus 1. Negative 1 times 4, my number is 7. 7 minus 1 is 6. So negative 1 times 4 raised to 6 is negative 4,096. Last one. My first term is 729. Now, I don't know about you, but there is no way in my head I could figure out what my common ratio is. So I'm going to do my second term over my first term. Type this in as a fraction. And it simplifies, after all that, to negative 1/3. So my common ratio is negative 1/3. So my first term is 729 times my common ratio. I want to put that in parentheses because it's negative, raised to n minus 1. So, oops, that's right. Oh, so 729 times negative 1/3 in parentheses. N minus 1, 7 minus 1 is 6. And it does make a difference, so just be careful whenever your common ratio is a negative. Make sure we put it in parentheses. Of course, I didn't even put it in parentheses. Like that. And then raise it to the 6th power. And after all of that, our answer is 1. Because if I don't put it in parentheses, okay, let me show you the difference. It comes out negative 1, and you're going to be wrong if it's a different sign. Okay, last but not least, I'm given a table. My table shows me what my first value is, and then I have to figure out my common ratio. So my first term is 10,000. My common ratio from 8,000 is I'm going to figure this out by doing my second term over my first term. Of course, I probably could do that in my head, but we're going to go ahead and use calculator advantage. Simplifies to 4/5. Then they want me to use my formula to find the 10th term. So my first term is 10,000 times my common ratio, which is 4/5, raised to n minus 1. So 10,000 times 4/5, 10 minus 1 is raised to the 9th power. So my answer is $13,042. And since we're talking about money, we're going to go ahead and round to the hundredths place. So that's $13,442.18.